welcome to this edition of Books and Beverages. My name is Sue Williams, and today I'm interviewing author Jeevani Charika. You write romantic comedies, so shall we start perhaps with a reading from you?
Yeah, sure. I will read something from my latest, which is The Winner Bakes It All.
Thank you.
This book, before it had its proper title, it was called Man Buns. So the working title was called Man Buns, but my editor very sensibly said I needed a different title.
Possibly so.
Yes. Okay, so this is Elodie, the heroine. Elodie smiled. She was quietly pleased with the way the icing on the red velvet cakes had come out as a deep, opulent red. She had placed a few edible pearls on them so they looked like jewel cases. She liked to match the decoration with a nod to what was inside. So the lemon and crystallized ginger cupcakes had tiny sugar paste lemons on top of the pale yellow swirl of icing. What's that one? The customer pointed at some cupcakes. That's Toblerone cheesecake flavor, said Elodie. It's got a baked cheesecake center hidden in the middle of the sponge. While the customer chose, Elodie looked out through the glass door. The two man buns were gone. Damn. Marty seemed to have collared someone else, though. Some guy in a suit. She couldn't see who it was. Elodie turned her attention to the customer. Marty would find out what he could. Looks like there's a new cafe coming, the woman said. That's nice. It'll be good to have a venue to pop down to if we need to have another meeting somewhere less stuffy than the office. She had thought of that when she'd written her business proposal. The previous owners had run a sandwich shop out of those premises. They made most of their daytime takings from office workers grabbing lunch. She used to often get people who would pick up their sandwich and then come over to grab a cake or a scone to go with it. Man Buns is a weird name for a cafe, though, the woman carried on. Probably named after their hair. Elodie boxed up the cakes and rang up the order at the till. Makes me think of other sorts of buns, said the woman, grinning. Elodie gave her a polite smile. She got enough of that sort of thing with Marty whenever he was single. She handed over the box of carefully packaged cupcakes. Come again soon. The woman didn't answer. Elodie decided to wait until Marty came back before she went back to her work. It was tea time. If anyone else came in, she'd have to stop again anyway. He returned a few minutes later, his mouth twisted into a little moo. What? Said Elodie. Surely there couldn't be more bad news. You're not going to like it. Marty fussed at his apron and washed his hands before taking his place behind the counter. Just tell me. So, he leaned his elbows on top of the display cabinet. Apparently it's going to be a keto meals cafe, like low-carb everything. He waved a hand. Elodie's gaze fell on the display, which was a shrine to sugar. Right. At least they weren't going to be competitors, not really. Carb counters wouldn't be coming into her shop anyway. Apparently the big guy owns a chain of gyms and the little guy is the catering one. He mainly does lunches for people at the gyms and he's branching out. But, get this, the reason they got the lease without it even going to advert is because Warren goes to the big guy's gym and someone mentioned that it was going to be coming out for rent and they did a deal from there. Elodie stared, not really seeing Marty anymore, and anger flared. The men had done a deal before the space even went out to let. All done over a drink and a laugh in the gym. Elodie, with her carefully laid out business plan and hard-won loan that she'd filled 11 billion forms to get, had never stood the smallest chance. It was so unfair.
Thank you. That sounds great fun. I have to ask, did you have to do a lot of research into eating cakes before you wrote it?
Yes, I suffer for my art, I do. Yeah.
Quite right too. That's great. Thank you. As I say, you've written about your heroine and her cakes. Do you identify with any of the characters in the book? Because I know you've written quite a number of books, haven't you, of romantic comedies?
I think so. I mean, they all come somewhere from inside my head, don't they? So there's a little bit of me in most of them. But no, generally they are their own people. At the start, sometimes there's a little bit of me in them. So Elodie, cake. I'm a big fan of cake. Used to bake a lot. I used to bake a lot before when the children were little.
Yes.
And then the hero Mal, he's keto stuff. I'm a keto mom, so one of my children is on the ketogenic diet. So yeah, so that's a thing of mine so they all have something of mine.
Yes, and I think most people, authors, when they write fiction, isn't it? You start with heroine, hero, depending on your gender, and you have ideas that you based on your own knowledge and experience. But I find, and I don't know if you're the same, that characters take a life of their own.
Oh yeah, completely. They become completely their own. Like, or sometimes you give them a name, and then about
Yes,
halfway through you think, this just doesn't suit them. This name I've
I
given them.
know.
They are a completely different name. So then you spend about, I don't know, you waste a day trying to figure out what name they should have.
And then you have to go all the way back through your text, changing it, which is even worse.
Yeah, especially if it's something like Dan, which comes in the middle of words. You end up with these
Yeah.
gobbledygook words because you've changed it to Luke or something.
How awkward. But yes, I think a
Yes,
lot of us
I've had
struggle like that.
in the proofread, I once had people Luxing because they were dancing.
Oh, good job that was picked up.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you. So, in all romantic novels, there's a point where the main characters come together and start getting passionate because it's not romantic if they don't. Um, when you write your stories, do they are they sexually explicit as many are these days, or do you sort of end at the bedroom door?
I end at the bedroom door. I feel it's a bit rude to watch. But so so yeah, definitely closed door. Nothing wrong with the other
Absolutely.
ones, other ways to do it, but yeah, this is just the way I do it.
And I imagine it's quite hard to write sexually explicit fiction and keep a straight face, which is great for writing comedy, but not if it's meant to be serious.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, I imagine it's quite hard to write a funny sex scene because the tension would be all over the place. But yeah, never tried.
Maybe that's our next effort.
That's the next project.
I'll make it funny. Uh, so, talking of romantic heroes, I have been looking at your website. What makes a good romantic hero for you?
Okay, I don't really like the big alpha hero types. Never have done. And in fact, part of the reason I started writing it was like, where are the nice guys? Why aren't people falling in love with nice guys? So I write nice guy heroes. It doesn't mean that they're wishy-washy. It just means that, that they are nice guys. Um, Somewhere in the past, I heard somebody talk about love is acts of service. Um, and that really stuck with me. So I try and bring that into the books so that they show their love, not by being dramatic and having like I don't know, like the big dramatic gesture, but by having acts of service which are meaningful to the heroine.
Yes, and
So
that's quite a profound thought, isn't it?
it was when I heard it, I
The
just
idea of
thought,
acts of service,
wow,
rather.
that
Yeah,
is true. The more you think about it,
yeah.
yeah,
It's a does your other half bring you aspirins and all sorts when you've got the flu, isn't it? Or do they go away and say go and suffer in
yeah,
silence? Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
So you're the other nice sort. You must be. I'm thinking of romantic fiction that I've read. That's quite an unusual hero. A lot of them are sort of brooding and mean and with big soft
Um,
underneath.
yeah, I think there's quite a few people who write heroes like mine, and it's you kind of get to know each other after a while because you're like, oh, I like this book. I'll read everything else she's written.
Yes, yes. Which
and,
is great for
and
marketing, isn't it? It's what you want, is it's really.
yeah, but I mean the other type, the alpha male hero, is much more popular.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I figured if I like this sort of thing, somebody else will too.
Oh, undoubtedly. And I noticed on your website when I was looking at it before we did this, um, I mean, you very generously give away lots of free stuff, and I was very attracted to the one that said lots of puns about knights, as in knights in armor. So I thought, well, I haven't done it yet. I will
Yeah,
this week.
that was that was written entirely to amuse myself.
But why not? If you
I love
find
a
it
good
funny,
pun.
some yeah, so do I. If you find it funny, hopefully somebody else will find it funny.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me a postcard. My husband's aunt occasionally sends the children postcards, and one of the postcards was this group of four guys walking down the street dressed in like fancy dress armor, and behind them there's the motorway sign. And I just thought, oh, okay, I have to write a book about this or a story about this. So it's a short story
Yes, yes.
with the
I
most
should
ridiculous puns I could
look
think of.
forward to reading it. Are there many puns in your book, or do you refrain on the whole?
I have to restrain myself. I have to take them out when I'm entertaining. Um, yeah, because I'm partial to a terrible pun as well, not just like a good pun. So yeah, I do often take them out, but my current editor does like a pun in a title, so we've got the winner bakes it all and stuff like that. So that's quite handy.
Oh dear. So anyway, so what inspired you to write romantic comedy? Because that isn't your background at all, is it?
Well, no, I'm a scientist by background, or was. So what inspired me to write romantic comedy? Well, the first book I wrote was a fairly serious women's fiction book.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are jokes in it. Turns out I write jokes when I'm not even thinking about it. So, um, but this was back in 2000 and something. So I finished my PhD. I had this book in my hand, and I wrote it, and it was straightforward women's fiction family drama, but the characters happened to be Sri Lankans. So I am Sri Lankan by descent, and I lived in Sri Lanka for a long time. So yeah, so I just um, wanted to have a book where the characters just happened to be Sri Lankan. The book isn't about them being Sri Lankan; it's about
Mhm.
family drama. Um, anyway, so I wrote this book, and it took me 3 years to write it. My first book, which doesn't sound that long actually, thinking about it now, but I'm much faster
It's
now.
fine to me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Took me 3 years to write it. Like after work, um, and I sent it off, and I got these quite nice rejections, which now looking back, I know were quite valuable at the time. This was you had to post it. This is so long ago. You had to post it, and like the envelopes came back, and you'd get like a pencil scribble saying, "I like this book," or "You can write, but I don't know how to sell it. I don't know who would buy it." That kind of thing came back quite a lot. Actually, I got 3 or 4. Um, and so I thought, well, there's obviously something wrong with it. So I joined the New Writer Scheme with the Romantic Novelists Association, and I sent it in for a critique. And my critique came back with some really, really useful stuff, actually. Um, but she said, you've got a romantic comedy voice just crying to get out. Why don't you just write a book for fun? And
Yeah.
I thought, okay. And so I wrote a book about this northern white girl who, who just goes to London. And it was just like a straightforward rom-com written for fun.
Yes.
And then I started sending that out because that went through the New Writer Scheme again, and it came back with like, this is pretty good, you should send it out. So I started sending that out, and that got a contract within about a year and a half. So so that's how I ended up in romantic comedy. I wrote those as Rhoda Baxter because when I got my publishing contract, the American publisher said, will you be using a pen name? And I said, oh, okay, fair enough. And I'd done my PhD on a bacterium called Rhodobacter. So I named myself after my bacteria.
I think
Um,
that's wonderful. I think what amazing name to come up with.
yeah, I thought it was a completely made up name, but then we moved to Hull, and I met a guy whose grandma was called Rhoda Baxter, because apparently Rhoda is a Scottish name.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
Baxter, of course, is a Scottish
it's a
name.
Scottish name.
Yes.
So yeah, but I've been Rhoda Baxter for a long time. So I published as Rhoda Baxter, writing books about white characters. I snuck in some Sri Lankans, my stealth Sri Lankans, my friends used to call them. So yeah, it's like a secondary character there, here and there. In each book there is one. Um, and so yeah, I wrote as Rhoda Baxter for a good 10, 11 years. Yeah, and then now I write under my own name, which is Jeevani Charika.
Which is great, isn't it?
That's cool. Yeah.
Do you find that people who read your Rhoda Baxter novels read the novels under your real name, or is it a different audience or different readership?
Um, it's interesting because I have two mailing lists, and sometimes I look to see how much the overlap is, and the overlap is actually quite small. Um, I find that the ones who read Rhoda Baxter will go on and read the Jeevani Charika books because they know me, they know my voice, and they've read enough of my books. They want to read more, so that's cool. A lot of the people who read the Jeevani Charika books don't read the Rhoda Baxter ones. I don't know why that could be. One possibility is that all of the Jeevani books are traditionally published. The
Right.
Rhoda books, some were traditionally published, but now they are all self-published because I got my rights back. So it might just be that snobbery is still there. It might be something else. I don't really know. But yeah, I'd find that really interesting that they know it's me. It's not a secret that both names are me. But yeah, so one
Yeah.
group will read the other, but like the Jeevani group won't read the Rhoda books, which is weird.
Right. And and your Jeevani books, as you say, you've got Sri Lankan origin main characters.
Yeah,
Are those novels set in Sri Lanka or are they in Britain?
they're all Britain. I think a couple of them
I know
have
the
a
winner
few.
bakes it all is obviously set in an imaginary British high street somewhere, but
Yeah, it's set in a small town in the Cotswolds.
how nice.
Yes. Yeah,
That's a
it's
place where you have big bakers.
well, you get lots of bakers, and also the previous book, Knowing Me, Knowing You, was also set near there, so there's some overlap in the characters there.
Yes, yeah.
But I used to live in Didcot in Oxfordshire, so it's an
All right.
area I know quite well. No, they're all of them set in the UK. I was going to say A Convenient Marriage has a few bits in Sri Lanka, but not really very much.
Right, right. So, in fact, even though the character is Sri Lankan and presumably the culture, Sri Lankan culture comes through, it's very much a British novel.
Oh yeah,
So you
especially
think you wrote about the audiences would be interesting. It's just different take on romantic characters, really.
yeah, like I said, the Rhoda people do read the Jeevani books, so that's good.
Yeah. So, okay, thank you. So, and most importantly, and you've already touched on this, what makes you laugh? Because you can't be serious if you are serious when you write romantic comedy. Because I write comedy. You take the craft of writing very seriously. Imagine if you didn't enjoy humour and puns and things, you'd find it very difficult. So, what makes you laugh?
Well, puns.
Puns, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, all sorts of things. The one of the things that my husband and I have in common is that we are very fond of comedy programs. So that's the thing that we do together, is to watch comedy shows together. So yeah, I do love that. Um, with the craft side of things, my friend Jane Lovering and I, occasionally we used to wander down these kind of comedy nerdery avenues, chatting about comedy and how it works. And we gave a talk at the Romantic Novelist Conference once. And about 3 years later, people kept asking us questions about this talk, which had happened years ago, right?
Yeah,
So we did a follow-up talk, and it just went down so well. We wrote a book called How to Write Romantic Comedy. And this is more about the first half of the book is how to write comedy in the context of romantic comedy. And the
yeah.
second half of the book is about how to write romance. Um, because yeah, just by our conversations, we realized we could actually structure the book this way, and we tried to do it more in an informal, chatty way without taking ourselves too seriously. Um, and yeah, it's a good fun book. I'm very proud of it.
Yes, and I believe it is doing very well. You've sold quite a lot of copies, which is quite something for a book of that
Yes,
sort.
yeah, we've sold about 1,000 copies now, which for a self-published, quite slim little book is pretty good.
Isn't it? So, um, you mentioned about getting published and how you had to use the name Rhoda Baxter, even though it was a
Yeah.
fun name to use. Um, what did you find publishers struggle to to work with a Sri Lankan author, or was it changed your name to something that's recognisably Scottish? It was much
Well,
easier.
it was an American publisher, so they probably wouldn't have figured out it was Scottish. But yeah,
Right.
um, yeah, it was easier. It was easier to, bearing in mind the time. So we're talking
Yes.
2011, 2012-ish. It was easier to have a white sounding name, and it was easier to have white characters. Largely, publishing is full of very, very well-meaning, very nice people, but it's very conservative. So they are not likely to take something that they perceive as a risk. And I mean, my agent, when so to tell you the rest of this story, so that first book that I wrote with the Sri Lankan characters, I wrote another one around 2017 because I was thinking, oh, Hull, living in Hull at the time, city of culture, set a book set in Hull about Sri Lankans. And that was the book that got me an agent. And so she started shopping this round, and she used to get people literally saying to her, "We've got a diverse author on our books. We don't need another one." And she was like, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but interestingly, the first Jeevani book, which was this one, Christmas at the Palace,
Yeah.
came entirely because my agent was in a bar chatting to an editor, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had just announced their engagement, and they had a 6-month window between that and the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And the editor said, "We would love a woman of color to write a book about a woman of color who marries a prince." And my agent went, "Oh, I know one." I know just the person. And she phoned me up and she was like, "Can you write a book really fast?" And I thought, "Can I? I don't know." And I thought, right, okay, well, I'm going to try. So I said, "Yeah, sure." Sure. So I wrote the book in about 4 months, which
That's
is,
fast.
I don't recommend it at all. I had to write 2,000 words a day. It was very stressful. And it was a collaboration as well. So because it was commissioned, they told me,
Yeah.
like, so I sent them a pitch, like outline, and they were like, change this, change this, change this, change this. And they kept doing that while I was writing it, which was really difficult. But anyway, the book that ended up was Christmas at the Palace, which came out just before the royal wedding. But if you look carefully, the prince is ginger.
Oh, well, there you go.
So there you go.
Did you
He's not in the
design the
book.
cover?
In the book, he's not ginger, but on the cover he is. But they wanted to use my real name, so that was the first Jeevani Charika book. And then my agent eventually found a publisher. I got a couple of offers. One was from a literary fiction publisher who said we could lean this towards literary, and one was a commercial, and I wanted to go with commercial. And yeah, so that was when Soma Met Sahan, which is that one. But they took it as a 2-book deal, and that very first book that I couldn't find a home for came out in 2019, about 13 years after I started submitting it. So don't give up on your books. This is the message. This one got shortlisted for an award. Didn't win, but hey, I got to stand on the same
That's
stage.
great publicity, isn't it? Just to get shortlisted is really something.
So yeah, so I'm very glad I didn't give up on it. It clearly was a good enough book.
But so, do you sell your Jeevani books in Sri Lanka yet, or have you not sort of got into that market?
I don't think so, because they can get it because they're published by HarperCollins,
Right.
so they are available through HarperCollins India. But yeah, I don't think so. I'm not very well known. I've had a couple of newspaper articles about me, but nothing.
Do you think that would also be a really good audience, wouldn't it, to sell your books?
Yeah, but I think there's also this is going on to the whole romance stigma thing. So there is a little bit of a stigma about romance, in that romance is often judged by the worst of its examples, not the best, which is bizarre, but okay. And when I was a child, when I was living in Sri Lanka, I wasn't allowed to read romance in case I got ideas,
Oh dear.
right? Which, clearly teenagers will get ideas whether you let them read romance or not. And the ideas they get, so I read a lot of books written by men.
Right.
And I think the first sex scene I read was in Jaws.
Right. I've never read yours, so you're ahead of me there.
Oh, there's a very filthy scene in it, very filthy. So so yeah, I'm not entirely sure that's a healthy way to go about things because at least romance, the heroine is at the center, and it is about the heroine's needs, and the heroine wins.
Yes.
So I don't know why the idea that as a woman in a relationship, in a heterosexual relationship, you get treated um, well, and somebody considers your needs and your hopes and your dreams and respects you. I don't know why that's an unrealistic expectation, but
There's a lot about toxic relationships out there, doesn't it?
yeah. So anyway, so yeah, so I think that's partly the thing in the a cultural thing about romance as well.
Even though there's nothing sexually explicit in your.
Absolutely nothing. No. Yeah, if I'd gone with literary fiction, I probably probably would do better over that.
You could be the one diverse person in literary fiction. It does sound.
Yes, true.
It's quite interesting when you, and this is an aside, but when you look at publishing, most of this these days are independent because it's so hard to get a traditional publishing deal,
Yeah.
isn't it? So yeah, that's quite something. I will move on swiftly to my next question. When was your first book published in your own name? So when you said it
20,
was a Christmas at the Palace, but
yeah,
when did you
let me
when
think.
did
I
you?
think it might be 2018, whenever it was Prince Harry got married.
Right.
Yeah, 2018. Yeah,
And did that get a good reception?
it did actually. Yeah, it did all right. Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah. Royal weddings were a big thing, and because they had such a short window, there was only about 3 or 4 that came out
Yes.
around the royal wedding. So me and my friend Janet Gover used there was a particular Amazon chart, and we used to swap places between number 1 and number 2 on a
Oh,
daily
that's
basis.
nice. That's nice to be top of an Amazon chart. Yeah, that's real success.
Yeah. So it was like royal weddings or something. Was a very
Yeah.
specific Amazon chart. But yeah, Janet had Marrying the Rebel Prince, and I had Christmas at the Palace. And for about 3 weeks, we were like just jostling to get to the top.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's great. Moving on, you have also written a number of guides, and you've already talked about your guide to romantic comedy. But you've also written about publishing, and also I think using Canva, which is a mystery to me, although I was shown once how to use it. So
Oh, I love Canva.
do you?
So when I first got my first publishing deal, in those days, you still have Facebook, and I think Twitter was just about around.
Yeah.
In fact, Twitter was around, I remember. And you needed pictures to stand out in the
Yes.
scroll. And I assumed naively that my publisher would give me some nice graphics, with my book cover, I don't know, set with some flowers or something. I don't know. No, I just got my book cover, like a JPEG of just the book cover image.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. And I thought, right, well, if I want nice pictures, I'm going to have to make them myself. So I like learning new things. So I, pootled about on the internet, found some videos, and I found Canva. At the time, Canva was quite new and it was quite basic. But it was fine. I'm not a graphic designer. I have no arts. Science, yes, arts not so much. And I taught myself how to use it, and I've been using it for nearly 11 years now, and I'm pretty good at it. And about a year ago, I started making tutorials showing authors how to use Canva, assuming all they have is a book cover.
Yeah.
Because often that is all you have. So yeah, so the channel's been running for about a year now, and I've given talks to various places, and it's always gone down really well because people go, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that." And these nice like graphics and videos that the big authors get, the ones who have actual
Yes.
teams. Yeah,
Yes.
you can make something very similar yourself in Canva, usually for free. So yeah, so I have a Facebook group called Canva Tips for Authors, and I have a YouTube channel called Canva Tips for Authors, and yeah, they're quite friendly places, and I love seeing what other people make because it's just pretty and it's nice and
Yeah.
exciting.
And I think for new authors, especially independent authors, that is a
Especially independent.
godsend. Yes,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you're out there, aren't you? I mean, I was very lucky. I had Edwin, who puts together books and beverages, sort of holding my hand and talking me through the process, and so far he's helped me publish 2 books. But not everybody has an Edwin in their life, so I think having tutorials and explaining. I could put on him as well, but never mind. And I suspect he'll be listening to this, but never mind. It is a very daunting process, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. It is, and it's one of those things that it looks completely inaccessible until you know how to do it. But once you know how, it's easy, and the more you do that, the more practice you get, the quicker you get, obviously.
Yes.
So yeah, so I use Canva for making bookmarks, making T-shirts. You can make websites. You can do all kinds of things in it, and I'm
Right.
slowly adding to my tutorial collection. The other book, the other guide that I published was getting published is just the beginning,
Yes.
which is actually about mainly about traditional publishing, a little bit about rights, which actually even independent authors need to know about rights. So
Yes.
my day job is in intellectual property. So I work as a university technology transfer person, and I mainly work in patents, but I read a lot of IP contracts, um, mainly using patents again. But the copyright rules are, the theory is just the same. So I can read a publishing contract and understand what it says. And people kind of heard about this because I've been knocking about for a while. So people used to ask me questions like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And I got asked them often enough that I just wrote them down. So getting published is just the beginning, is about what to expect when you get a publishing contract, what to expect from your editors, what to expect from cover design, what your contract actually means. So if you are going to sign a publishing contract, for the love of God, please read it before you sign it, because there's a lot of sharks out there who are pretending to be legitimate publishers and aren't.
And I think I always remember when I first started writing, I went to a workshop, and this was a woman there who had a traditional publishing contract, and they'd offered her something 13, 14% royalties, which she thought seemed very low until she checked it all out. And actually, for a first book, that was seen as really generous.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's not. Well, it depends. If it's for a hardback, then yeah, okay.
yeah.
But for an ebook and a paperback, less so. Um,
Well, we could
yeah,
go on to Amazon where it was supposed to get 70%, but it never worked out quite like
not
that.
quite 70%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but if you're a 99p book, it's 35%. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, it
Yeah,
got to the point that with some of my traditionally published books, if somebody bought my book for 99p from Amazon, I got about 7p. Okay. If they borrowed the book from the library, I got 9p. So I was like,
wow.
go to the library, it's free for you, and I get an extra 2p.
Yes. And it's a whole minefield, though, isn't it? Especially if it's not something you've ever done before.
It
It's
is. It's very confusing, and traditional publishing in particular is very opaque. And like I say, there are people who take advantage of the fact that it's very opaque. And also, the bookseller did a thing a couple of years back about how over 50% of newly published authors find that it's detrimental to their mental health, the publishing process. And
wow.
I can see that, um, especially if you have a traditional publishing deal, because they don't tell you anything. So a couple of my friends, Janet Gover, who's an Australian author, and Alison May, who used to be the chair of the RNA, um, the three of us got together and formed this thing called Author Breakthrough Club. It used to be called Debut Author Club, but some of our members went, we're not debut authors anymore. We're on book 3 or 4, and we don't want to leave. So we were like, okay, well, we'll change it to Author Breakthrough Club so you can stay and not feel weird about it. Because what people found was that you get your publishing deal and you want to ask these questions, but you're afraid because you might look stupid. You're afraid to ask for more time because you think, oh, well, they won't want my book anymore. And you can't complain about it to your unpublished friends because it just looks like you're complaining that your diamond shoes are too tight. And so we wanted to have a safe place where people could ask these questions, and also to do training, like how to set up a newsletter, how to make up your images, how to write a press release. So every month we have a little mini course, and when you join, you have access to all of the mini courses. And yeah, and that seems to be helping, and it's quite cheap. It's tenner a month, so yeah, hopefully it helps people feel less alone. And to be honest, a lot of the questions we get are, my publisher wants to do this. Is this normal? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And when it isn't, we're like, okay, these are the words to use. Say this and see what you can get from them.
And is it still part of the Romantic Novelists Association, or have you just gone completely?
It's something separate.
Yeah,
I've been, when I graduated from the NWS, with the
the
RNA, the
the
new
new
writers
writers
scheme,
scheme. Yeah.
I felt the loss of that particular type of mentorship, if you see what I mean, which you got a
Yes.
lot
Yeah.
of in the new writer scheme. So yeah, is this is separate. So this is after you've got your publication deal and after you've got your book out. And yeah, we have a few indie authors in there as well. But like, as an indie author, I licensed my audiobook rights to someone. They made the audiobook and they gave me a royalty. It's not much, but it's not something I could do myself.
Yes.
So you do need to know about rights as an indie author. I licensed partial translation rights, which is a completely new and weird thing that they just made up. But legit guys. So there's this app that teaches people to read in a foreign language, or teaches people a foreign language by you read the books in with
So
some
you
words,
get
some
the pronunciation right. Is
yeah,
that the idea of it? Yeah.
something like that. So they only ever translate a maximum of 30% of the book, so it's a partial translation.
Weird.
And
Very weird.
it doesn't conflict with the full translation rights, because a 30% translated book is no use to anybody in a foreign language unless they're in this app learning this new language. So yeah, that was a really interesting idea. So the books have only just come onto the platform, so I'm waiting to see if they make any money. But again, those are all my indie books. I can do that because I don't have to go through the publishers departments to do it. Yeah, watch this space. Let's see if this
Well,
works.
so which way are you likely to go in the future? Are you going to go more to this sort of helping people get published side, or will you always stick with your actual novels?
I think I'll always write novels. That's what I'm here for. Everything else is just trying to be helpful.
But very useful, I should imagine. I mean, I know somebody's writing a marketing guide for independent authors, and looking forward to it coming out, really, because publishing and marketing are the two horrors of being a writer, aren't they?
Yeah, I have so many books about, because I listen to Joanna Penn, and whenever she mentions a book about marketing, I'm like, oh yep, buying that. I'm still no good at it, but there you go.
I believe this one is very much a sort of, they used to have all the books for dummies, like
Oh yeah.
computing for the dummies. Well, this is like marketing books for dummies. So hopefully it will be very simple.
Oh, good. That would be
Not my
useful.
book. It's not my book. So finally, what are you currently working on?
I am currently writing a book which doesn't have a title. Well, the working title is the guy with the dragon tattoo, but that again is, I have terrible working titles.
I think that's
And
already been used anyway. So
well, exactly. So yeah, but I needed to call it something apart from this blooming book, which is
yes.
what I normally call it. So that's going to come out next year with HarperCollins, and then I have another book to write because it was a 2-book contract. So yeah, and in the meantime, I'll see what else I can do. See if I can squeeze another book into the middle.
And
So yes,
is this under your real name or
yeah,
under regular?
these are both Jeevani books.
Mhm.
So the book I'm currently writing it's set at a seaside hotel. And yeah, so there's ice cream and seaside and being attacked by
Oh,
seagulls
nice.
and all of that kind of thing.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
good stuff. Thank you very much for talking to us. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you for having me.